Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today, because we're going to skip the usual intro stuff and jump straight into the jaw-dropping reality of modern asymmetric warfare. We're looking at a profound, absolutely massive global shift, the widening gap in drone manufacturing and deployment between the United States and China. And look, this isn't just about cool new technology. It is about the fundamental economics of defense and exactly how a potential future conflict could be won or lost before it even begins.
Okay, let's dive into this. Just think about the absolutely unsustainable math happening right now. In recent conflicts, the United States has literally been forced to use Patriot missiles, which cost around $4 million apiece, or even THAAD interceptors that run $12 million each just to shoot down incoming swarms of Shahed drones. And those drones? They cost maybe $20,000 to $50,000 to make. This creates a mathematically impossible defense equation. I mean, if you're in a prolonged conflict against a highly capable manufacturing powerhouse like China, defending yourself by spending millions to destroy something that costs pennies is a fast track to exhausting your entire defensive stockpile in a matter of days.
And you know, the stark contrast in military philosophies goes even deeper when you look at older aircraft. The U.S. routinely drops about $15 to $16 million just to convert an old F-16 jet into a drone. Why? Largely because they intend to use them for complex pilot training where the aircraft actually needs to survive and return. China, on the other hand, takes a totally different approach. They're spending a mere $500,000 to convert their massive stockpile of retired J-6 fighters into J-6W drones. They literally rip out the ejection seats and the heavy analog dials, shedding nearly 197 kilos in the process, and just slap in digital autopilots, because to them, these are designed as expendable one-way kamikaze drones meant to saturate and completely overwhelm enemy air defenses.
So, you might be thinking, well, let's just build our own low-cost drones. To combat this gap and stop relying on Chinese tech, the Pentagon spent millions developing approved domestic options. But the reality? Those US-developed alternatives are anywhere from 8 to 14 times costlier than the banned Chinese craft they're supposed to replace. It's a huge operational hurdle. In fact, an internal memo from the US Interior Department actually warned that restricting their teams to these domestic drones reduced their vital sensor capabilities by 95%. It basically halted critical operations like wildlife tracking and land conservation. So why exactly is the US struggling so heavily to compete on price and scale?
Section 1. The manufacturing divide. Right now, China controls roughly 90% of the commercial drone market. And this dominance? It's absolutely no accident. It was strategically engineered from the ground up through initiatives like Made in China 2025, which is a whole-of-society effort heavily fueled by state subsidies. Because of this unparalleled scale, a Chinese company like DJI can pump out literally millions of reconnaissance drones every single year. Meanwhile, top US competitors like Skydio are currently only producing in the thousands, and they're doing it at 3 times the cost.
Now, what's really interesting is when you break down the sheer economic realities that make US manufacturing fundamentally more expensive. Take labor, for instance. US manufacturing workers cost around $45.65 an hour, compared to just $17 to $28 in China. Factory rent in prime US industrial markets can easily be triple the cost of Tier 1 Chinese hubs like Shanghai. Even industrial electricity is almost double the price in the US. So while America definitely has advantages in things like natural gas and advanced AI-driven automation, the raw baseline cost for mass-producing physical hardware are undeniably steeper.
Furthermore, the cost of raw materials gives China another huge structural edge. China maintains a dominant grip on the upstream supply chain. They control over 70% of the global refining capacity for 19 strategic minerals, essentially locking down the foundational elements of modern hardware. The US, on the flip side, relies incredibly heavily on importing intermediate goods, like the specialized semiconductors required for a drone's brains and eyes. Importing these materials automatically tacks on shipping fees, long lead times, and import duties straight to the bottom line of American manufacturers. But you know, the cost of materials and labor isn't the only roadblock here.
Section 2. The Valley of Death. If you really want to understand why American defense manufacturing stalls out, you have to understand a concept known as the Valley of Death. This is the perilous financial gap where innovative US hardware startups simply run out of money. They manage to scrape together enough funding to build an amazing working prototype, but they don't yet have the massive government contracts needed to survive and scale up to mass production. Let me walk you through exactly how devastating this catch-22 is for these companies. Step 1. An American startup completes a brilliant R&D prototype. Amazing, right? Step 2. They want to sell it to the Department of Defense.
But here's the catch. The DoD won't award a major production contract unless the company already has the factory capacity to actually fulfill it. So, step 3. The company goes to the bank for a loan to build that factory. But traditional lenders absolutely refuse to finance a massive facility without a guaranteed DoD production contract already in hand. Which brings us to step 4. A complete dead end. They are trapped in a holding pattern with nowhere to go.
So the crucial point is this. Why doesn't venture capital just step in and save the day? I mean, American VC is incredibly robust, deploying hundreds of billions of dollars. But their model relies heavily on power law mathematics. They need 10x to 20x returns quickly to cover their portfolio losses. And that works beautifully for software, where scaling up just means buying more server space. Defense hardware, though? That requires $50 to $150 million up front just to pour concrete and build a physical drone factory, all before a single contract is even signed. For most venture capitalists, that kind of physical overhead is simply too risky.
Section 3. Tariffs and compliance.
Now, while U.S. manufacturers are struggling to scale, the U.S. government is actively trying to level the playing field through policy. Over the last several years, we've seen a steady, intense escalation of trade barriers targeting Chinese technology. It started back in 2018 with 25% tariffs under Section 301. By 2021, DJI was added to the U.S. entity list over national security concerns. Then came port detentions under the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. And most recently, in April 2025, reciprocal tariff hikes pushed the total cumulative import duties on Chinese drones to a staggering 170%.
On top of those massive financial penalties, there are very strict legislative hurdles, like the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA. Sections 848 and 89 of this act explicitly ban restricted Chinese companies, like DJI and Audel, from federal contracts. If you want to sell a drone to a U.S. government agency today, it must meet incredibly high cybersecurity standards and offer a completely transparent supply chain proving no components come from restricted entities. These compliance mandates force manufacturers to vet entirely new supply chains, which naturally drives production costs even higher.
And this brilliantly illustrates the jaw-dropping reality for buyers on the ground. That 170% cumulative tariff creates a brutal situation for enterprise buyers and public safety teams. Take the DJI Matrix 30T, for example. It's a total workhorse for public safety. Pre-tariff, it was around $17,000. Post-tariff, you're looking at an estimated landed cost of nearly $47,000. For fire departments, structural inspectors, and agricultural teams, this essentially triples their equipment costs practically overnight.
It's a profound shift within the industry, perfectly captured by this quote from our sources. If you're still budgeting for drones like it's 2023, you're not planning, you're gambling. Trade policy and geopolitical tension, rather than standard supply and demand, are now the single biggest factors dictating the U.S. drone market.
Section 4. America's catch-up strategy. But the United States isn't just sitting idle as prices skyrocket and supply chains choke. Enter the Pentagon's ambitious Drone Dominance Program. Backed by a $1.1 billion federal investment, the explicit goal here is to equip the U.S. with hundreds of thousands of low-cost weaponized drones by 2027. They've already initiated the purchase of 30,000 units, pulling in fresh designs from both scrappy startups and established defense contractors alike. It's a massive, concentrated demand signal specifically meant to jumpstart domestic production at scale.
And to fix that treacherous valley of death we talked about earlier, there's a newly activated financial tool. It's an unwieldy acronym, the SBICT program, which stands for the Small Business Investment Company Critical Technology Program. This is the financial bridge designed to finally save American hardware startups.
How does it actually work? Well, the magic number is 2. For every $1 of private capital a licensed fund raises, the U.S. government provides $2 in debt at the 10-year Treasury rate. This means a fund that raises $1 million can suddenly deploy $3 million. It offers the crucial growth credit these companies desperately need to build their factories, buy equipment, and actually execute on those massive Pentagon contracts.
Let's move to the global stage and see how this builds, because it's not just the U.S. reacting here. Ukraine, forged in the fires of conflict, is scaling to produce an unbelievable 4.5 million drones a year. Taiwan is ramping its capacity to 180,000 units annually. And to sidestep those crushing 170% tariffs we discussed, even major drone manufacturers are rapidly relocating their supply chains and assembly lines to countries like Vietnam, Mexico, and India to create entirely China-free production ecosystems.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly vital question. Can the U.S. successfully build a competitive China-free drone supply chain before the next great power conflict? The capital is starting to flow, the legislation is firmly in place, and the stakes quite literally couldn't be higher. It is a race against time, economics, and scale. I really hope this explainer gave you a clear, engaging understanding of the forces shaping the future of global security. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep questioning the world around you.